So last year, some of our first talks were on seed starting, and I rewatched a few of it, and Ange and we went over garden planning, so what you want to plant in your garden. Ange went over a lot of 101 stuff, basics, getting yourself set up for success for starting seeds. So I don't want to go over all of those. They're on our YouTube channel, which is On the Crossroads under a homesteading playlist. Go ahead and watch those. Companion planting, we covered a ton of stuff last year. And so not the most exciting, but extremely informative. So I just was thinking, well, okay, so what are we going to cover this year? So you guys all did it last year. And so now you're going to do it a second time. What might have happened? So you've got what you want to plant in mind. You've got the seeds, and you have a timeline on when those are all coming to, when you've got to put them in the ground. That's what I used to take care of, is millions of seeds at a time. Those are pansies. Come on, wrong way. Oh, that is my old work at a greenhouse. So Fernley, so all those went to Walmart, Canadian Tire, Lowe's, yeah. Oh, there we go. So this is what I've got at home, my first year. And so I show this, so this was the setup I created for my own little garden grow op. I've insulated the sides because it's cold in my basement and I wanted to keep as much heat as in. So this is what I had. This is our little houseplant nook that we have in our house. But there's a problem in the houseplant nook. And then, of course, now I have a seed growing area. What am I going to do? I'm going to bring in pet plants that I want to survive over the winter, because why not? I have the space. Let's fill them with plants from outside. So like this beautiful guy here, awesome whitebird or bird of paradise. Why wouldn't you want to keep that over winter if you can? Because I got a text from someone this winter with that picture. No, not mites, scale. So she thought it was aphids, and it's actually citrus scale, or some sort of scale. There's millions of types of scale, but the result is the same. That outside, you're not going to notice it because it's small, birds eat it, the weather gets to it, rinses it off. Inside, you've put it in a beautiful, happy, warm, sunny, watered area, and now it's just going to thrive. So that is a problem. So whether it's aphids or whatnot, I'll show you pictures in case people, I've gotten this question about other bugs, but yeah, it's scale. My first reaction, burn it. It is an insect. I've got pictures here. Yeah, that's it, close up under a microscope, off of one of my plants. So it is a waxy little thing. Awesome. So that's a female. You can see its little black eyes. And you can see in this one that is a baby. They're called nymphs or crawlers. And once they get old, they get waxy and really hard to kill. In a greenhouse setting, it's death and lots of long hours. In your house, you have 3 options. Throw the thing out, clip it, or as it says there, take a Q-tip, and with hydrogen peroxide, you're going to go over all of it. And you're going to miss some, so you're going to have to go back in a couple of weeks and keep going. Trim off the dead stuff because it sucks the life out of your plant. That's what it does. It is sucking the life, and it doesn't just stay to the citrus. It's not really picky. It will go to whatever woody plant that you're growing. So it might look fine. So then that way, so now you've got it in, you've got this pest now. Once you've got it, other plants are going to start to show up with it. If you take them out of your greenhouse area, you're going to want to disinfect with either bleach or hydrogen peroxide, and just wipe it all down, because that is the easiest way, the only way to get rid of it. Soap and water is not going to work on these guys. You want to dry out that waxy shell, because each one of those little girls can lay up to hundreds of eggs underneath her, live things underneath her. And the males don't do anything. They fly. They look like fungus gnats. You won't even know that it's that specifically. And they don't feed, and the females don't need them to reproduce. I know. I love bugs. You guys love fermenting. I love bugs. So I just hate getting rid of them. But yeah, so if you really are attached to that plant, you're gonna have to go in a few times and just clean, be vigilant. They live on the hard wood. So if you had a citrus or a plum or something you really hope 1 year, decade to get fruit from, you're not, then you're going to have to look for it on a regular basis. It looks kind of bumpy, it looks kind of weird. Close up, that's what it looks like. So I'll show you. That's what she showed me. Wow. You can see all the leaves have fallen off because it's just sucking the life out of the plant. So, yeah. And then if you do throw out the plant, but you like the pot, disinfect the pot and bleach. Other bugs to look out for. So, I mean, even if you went to a garden center and needed some garden therapy over the winter and bought something, check it, because there's other stuff that could be on here. So that's what I had over the winter. And I got aphids. We all know aphids, right? So that's off of one of my succulents. That's off of another greenhouse I had. So aphids love the more tender stuff. They'll live under the leaves. They'll live on the new growth. So you can see they are totally swarmed on that new bud and just going to suck the life out of that, which is literally what they do. They're all suckers. And again, they give birth to live babies, hundreds, and they're different colors. Those ones are green. Don't know, I can't remember the specific, but there's black, there's orange, there's peach. So yeah, it's awesome, but these ones you can get rid of with soap and water. That is easy enough to do. Soap and water, a little bit of oil in there to spray it on, and that sticks it to the leaf, so that way it doesn't just wash off. You'll have a little bit of a weird film on your leaf, but if you really want to keep that plant, that's what you need to do. And then aphids, again, one little guy, you're going to miss him. So once you get your tomatoes and your peppers and everything else, you're going to have to watch it because they love those too. So again, you're going to want to clean out that greenhouse area, disinfect it with bleach or hydrogen peroxide. Vinegar will not work. Soap won't work on the scale. And then I almost said mealy. So that fuzzy stuff right here, those are mealy. They're more common in, again, you won't see it outside. They're outside, but it's when they're inside, they're not being eaten by anything. Those are really bad off of some plants you get at a garden center. And they do spread. They don't die in the winter. So if you had your pots outside and you thought it got cold enough, they're not dead. Bleach your pots. So, or throw out the dirt. They live in the soil. And again, waxy film. Here's, bake the dirt, or just get new dirt, or throw that dirt outside, because dirt loses its retention, which we'll go into in a second. Oops, what happened? Anyway, no, so it again has the waxy film, lays its babies underneath it, then the babies crawl out. If the infestation's bad enough, it kind of forms a weird webby nest, and you poke that open and all the babies come out. Males, again, look like fungus gnats to anyone who sees them. Useless. Women don't actually need them. No, sorry. No, it's absolutely incredible that I don't know why. They just, but that's how they spread too. The males are used. So if the colony aphids, if the colony gets too bad, so if you have it in your upstairs little house plant area and the colony's too bad or too infested, they'll start producing winged aphids, and then those winged aphids will go look for fresh ground, fresh plants. I'm not trying to scare you. So yeah, that is, in a greenhouse setting, we actually spent a ton of money on this guy. He is apparently a good bug, and he's trying to feed on the mealy bug, because mealy is a 3-step process in a greenhouse to get rid of all horrid chemicals. One of them is hydrogen peroxide at high concentrations. But we were so fed up that we tried getting a little dude to come in and eat the bad dude, even though they look exactly the same. So it didn't. I don't know. We used everything, so we're not sure what worked. And we had to literally put this bug on top of the mealy for him to find him. We're like, be hungry. Come on, eat him. Like, it was an experiment to see if it would actually work. So that is your prep for this year, is check any of your household pet plants that you think are making it over winter. If you haven't looked underneath the leaves or in the crotch of the plant or new growth, if there is any, they might be lurking there. And it's good practice to disinfect everything, because the hydrogen peroxide and bleach will kill any fungus, which in the plant world we don't want. And that way it just keeps it clean and actually kind of sterile. So, yeah, that is the 3 predators you might find. Mites, you mentioned spider mites. That is also a thing. They're easier. You want to kind of, they're not going to die with soap water. You'll still want to kind of use the hydrogen or bleach on them. Spider mites are super hard to spot because they're even tinier. You can, if you look underneath, signs that they're there are the leaves just don't look. There's nutrient deficient looks, and then there's spotty, something's kind of sucking at it look. And if it's looking kind of weird, that's a sign. Flip it over if you see webbing, if you see dots you can't see with your eyes well. Those are signs that the spider mite's there. They, again, it's going to be contact to get them off is the easiest, because you need to touch it, yes.
Do you mix the hydrogen peroxide with water?
Well, no, you want it 3% concentration. So if you're buying from the store, 3%, then just use it straight. If you're buying stronger stuff, wear gloves. It burns your hands. Because hydrogen peroxide, so yeah, she asked if it would mix with water. Don't mix it if it's already 3%. Just use it straight. And then, because it will eat living flesh. That is what it does, right? So if you get the stronger stuff, wear the gloves, because it will eat your hands. It does not harm the plant. It doesn't harm the plant. The stronger stuff you might start killing off and kind of burning it, but it doesn't harm the plant, no. Did you have a question, Mark? Yeah.
So the little bug that doesn't need a male to procreate.
Yeah.
So if we took that little woke liberal and brought it to Pastor Nate, would that fix it?
I don't know. I don't know if he would speak his language.
Oh.
And it's God's creation. Come on.
If there's any woke liberals here, I want to introduce you to Jesus. That'll fix it.
God created it this way for some reason. I don't know. It is just mind-blowing sometimes. Yes, Christy. Oh, yep.
Another thing to think about too when you're getting ready to plant your plants is if you're reusing pots,
Yes.
you need to disinfect those too.
Right, exactly. That's what I'm saying. So if you're reusing those pots, which we want to, because why not? Why would we buy new ones? Disinfect them with bleach. In greenhouses, I've done that. That's been my job, is just boiling water works too, if you don't want to. Yes, Jocelyn.
I don't know if you're going to get into this or not. You just briefly mentioned about soils kind of degrading over time and stuff. I'd love to hear a little bit more about that if you're going to talk about it or not.
Yeah, yep. We'll get into that because that's actually the second question. So yeah, so now That is, now find those specks in that. Yeah, that was fun. I love it. But I miss doing that, actually. So those are all hibiscus. Hibiscus love, or those, all 3 bugs love those, plus everything else. So yeah, that is, the little greenhouse is easy. Okay, so here, watering. So yeah, I'm touching on now you've got your greenhouse cleaned, you've got your seeds started. My number 1 question is how to water. And I wish I had a formula like Greg does, 1 part water to 3 parts soil, right? No. It's really a feel thing. So how do you get that feel? Because even right here, you can see I planted one thing, I think this was alyssum actually, with something that's not germinating. So now this needs different watering. This was a bad idea. But here we go. So soil, I find it easiest to break down soil into 5 kind of wetness levels. It makes the most sense. We have saturated at number 5, so it is soaking, it's dripping out the bottom of the pot. You water, what's number 4 is kind of field capacity, or just before that. It's not quite as dripping, it's shiny at the top, and water's not quite dripping out, but if you squeeze it, you're gonna get water everywhere, right? 3 is field capacity. It's where you would love to keep it at all times. Because the water is being retained to the soil particles, but there's also airspace. 2, you can see it's starting to go a little bit more light brown. That's when you want to start watering it. And 1 is permanent wilting. So you can see in this picture, this was an awesome picture, not mine. The edges of the soil are starting to pull away from the container, right? That is going to be harder to rehydrate that soil because you've let it dry out, so there is no more water in it. Yeah, reusing the new soil. It usually, if you're using old soil for some reason, especially with peat moss, and it kind of loses that magnetic charge that holds the water to it somehow. I don't know all that science, I just know it happens, and so you need to rehydrate it more. It doesn't hold it as well, so if you've used the soil, or it's old, or it's dried out, so when you start your seeds, instead of just putting it into the dry soil, if your soil's dry from last year, you want to actually put some water into it, get it to about looking to a 3, so not quite shiny at a 4, but at a 3. I know this is kind of weird language, but that's the best way I've ever been able to teach people at work on where they want it. Yeah. So that way there's water, and that way it also accepts water better. So have you ever had a plant where it just totally dried out and you pour it over top and the water just spills off, like you're just pouring it on a rock? That it's at a level 1. So there's no water, there's no airspace, there's no charge bringing the water through. The next slide kind of shows it even better. So this is, like I said, this is a 5, this is about a 4, 5, and this is the 3. So the difference being this, you can see there's air bubbles, the roots have space to grow what you want. This is literally, the roots have nowhere to go. And water and soil do have an electric charge. So if you get to here, you can see there's water clinging to, this is probably a 2 to 1 here. Water's clinging to the soil, but if you water it, there's nothing, because it has that charge. You know how water can go up because it follows its charge to the next one? Nope, okay. Yeah, okay. Water, it does. Water, or when you've got a cup and it rims, it's not flat, right? And sense would say it should be flat, but water has this kind of dome to the edges. That's because it's got a little bit of a charge to it, and it's holding it together in that form. So when you don't have any water to hold to the existing water or to the soil, it will just not be able to retain it, and instead the soil contracts and pulls away from your container and whatnot, and then you'll have to literally soak it, put it in a tub of water, let it sit there to rehydrate, and take it out and hope that it's doesn't overwater, because there's that danger. So yeah, as the soil gets older, it's just throw it in the garden and use new stuff. Yeah. So when you're doing seedlings then, again, no great formula. Each seedling wants a different water level. Tomatoes and peppers love it drier than something else, plants. But also, when you're going through this, if you're trying to keep it at a 3, you'll probably water it till it gets to a 4 and then let it dry out till it gets to about a 2. And then you'll re-water it, right? So that is the trick. So that's why we use drainage holes. I know people love putting rocks in the bottom of things. You're just retaining water down there. Don't do it. It's not as effective. And yeah, so they call this the permanent wilting spot. If you let it get to a 1 too long, it's going to die. You won't be able, the roots are going to die. There's no air. It's not great. Plants will start to wilt at about a 2 to 1. That's okay. It tells you you can water it. So that's where you start listening to your plants that you've grown. So at the seedling stage, you keep them more moist. The water doesn't need to be soaking. You want more like you saw here. I've got a dome, so it's a humid environment. So you've got it, the soil's probably 2 to 3, but the humidity is okay, because that's where plants will also get their moisture. And then you don't have to water it to a 4, which can drown it, because you're just keeping all the moisture there. So you can see in my poor planning, I had these tall guys. They shouldn't have been with these guys. They're touching the top. They need to come out, but they're spindly and not ready to transplant yet, which we won't touch today. Once they start to sprout like that, germinate, then you get the humidity off of them. Because if they start getting and touching the moisture at the top, they're going to start to rot, and you'll get your dieback. So that's when you want to start managing the soil in the moisture in the soil rather than in the air when you start doing the 2 to 3 kind of watering system. Yeah. I'm just making sure I make sense in my head. Because once, like I said, the plants will start to wilt at about a 1 and a 2, which is okay. That lets you know you can actually manage their growth via that watering. So like these are super tall and leggy, they shouldn't have been watered so much because they were getting too much water. They're just going to keep growing, they're happy. But if you started them too early, you started them in February or March, you don't want them to be this big by the time you get them in the garden, unless they're tomatoes, but you don't have that much space maybe. You can monitor the plants with watering by letting them just dry out just to that verge. Yes, this takes a lot more time and attention to them, but that way you don't end up with a leggy pepper plant this tall, because it'll keep growing if you keep watering, or a basil especially. You can keep it at a nice height to a certain extent. So yeah, those are the 2 big questions I get on seed starting. Everything else, you've done it for a year or 2. You've learned that the windowsill doesn't necessarily work great for a light source. You figured out you need more light. Now you've got this space, so you've added plants over the winter, because why not? But watering is definitely also a number 1 thing. So if you have your plants in the windowsill, because it is a south-facing thing, they're going to dry out at a different rate than someone who's got a little shelving unit going. So that's why it's not a 2 cups every 3 days sort of deal. Yes, Jocelyn.
I just want to add that last year I found out that my windows, because it's a newer house, have UV protection on them.
Hey.
And so that was a fun, I had been doing window sills at my old house and it actually worked very well at my old
Right.
house. And then at my new house, things like barely grew at all. And I was going, what is going on here?
Yeah.
And that's when it was something that just hadn't even occurred to me that that could be a possibility. And the same thing came up when my son had jaundice, and it was in the winter, and they want you to put them in the window because it couldn't just go outside with him. But our windows weren't allowing UV in anyway, so it wasn't helping.
Yeah, that's definitely something. Yeah, the windows so that you don't get a sunburn in your house. Or fading your couch cushions. They've put protections on them. So yeah, and even with the lights, there's a lot of different lights out there. The cheaper the light, the cheaper the quality. Ange went into that in great detail. It was awesome. So definitely look into that video, which is why, yeah. So that is, yeah, so here's some of my babies. So these guys were osteospermum. They're probably in the greenhouse right now. And again, I didn't want them to grow too much, but I can't go check each one of them. So if they started to wilt just a little bit, so wilting, if it's not physically bending over, they also will get kind of a gray tinge to the leaf. That is the beginning of the wilting. So that's when you can water, that gray tinge to the leaf. You'll know what I mean when you see it. It'll just not look as vibrant green as it did yesterday. So those ones, because maybe in your greenhouse or your growing area, the edge where there's a draft or something is going to dry out more than the center, which is usually the case where there is no draft, which is why I also boxed in my little shelf just to keep all outside elements so it's almost even, I'm sure. And then these guys, some plants, so these guys like to be watered, and if you keep watering them, they'll keep growing, whereas these ones are little begonias, so they want to be as dry as possible, or they'll keep growing, but they can stand even more dryness. So just again, there's no easy formula. You just have to really watch the soil, watch the leaves, and you'll hopefully have better success at watering, and try not to water to a 5. Because that saturation, like it showed in the picture, there's no airspace for those roots to grow, so your plant's not going to grow like you want it. And then, so it's not going to use the water like you want it. Therefore, it will sit in the water longer, and therefore it will rot more likely. And you'll have that die back right at you'll be like, I watered it though, what's wrong? There is too much water. So try and drain it. Try and get it down to a 3 as soon as possible, which add more heat, add a breeze or something just to get that evaporation going. Yeah. Questions?
Do you recommend top watering or bottom watering?
When they're little seedlings, so like in that tray, I would have done the spraying. You just used a spray bottle just to keep the humidity up, because the roots, if the pot's this deep, the roots are only going down to about here. So if you water from the bottom, then all of this is going to be soaking wet for a while. So while the plant's young, I would recommend top mist bottling or gentle watering from the top. As they get older and the roots are starting to hit the bottom, then you can try watering from the bottom if you have a system set up with trays and whatnot, then that's all right. But at the beginning, definitely more misting from the top and keeping, because that's where the roots are. So you got to think of that where as they get older, you can water a little deeper because the roots are going to go deeper. But if you soak from the bottom, then the plant can't use all of that bottom water depending on why. That's why I also see these are super little cells. The tray is probably 2 foot by 1 foot, and there's 512 cells in that. So those are super small. So because there's no roots, so we don't want too much water around those roots, so it can actually dry out. So yeah, that's why starting in a 4-inch pot, because you think you're saving time with that tomato, because that's where it's going to end up eventually, is going to cause you more headache, because now you've got more space to water, and it's not going to dry out. You're not going to get that wet to dry time that it does actually need. And yeah, if you overwater, then you've drowned your seedling. Yeah. Yeah.
This is a real question this time. So, with trees, like a lot of trees don't like growing around black walnut trees.
Right.
So, with seeds, is there certain seeds that don't like growing with other seeds? And the second question is part of it. Is there seeds that complement other seeds?
Oh, definitely. While starting in this stage, it doesn't really, it's not even, because the walnut has to do with, I point out there because there's tons, a chemical that they release, and that's what interacts with the other plants to give the walnut space so you can't grow anything around it. Seedlings, if you're growing, it's more, short answer, no. I don't think there's chemicals that from this, but you do kind of want to do more individuals, because then you'll be pulling them apart anyway. More important would be like my first picture of the tray where I had the tall lanky things with the not sprouted yet things. Those would be the interactions I'd be more concerned about. So when you're starting to seed those seedlings and there's guidelines starting in March and then 2 weeks later at the end of March, and you're like, oh, I think I can get away with just doing it all in the beginning of March. Well, no. Now you're going to end up with that possibly, because some of them just take longer to germinate. So if they say the germination time is 2 weeks versus 1 week, then you're ending up with that. So that would be the more companion tray seeding that I would look into. That's a really good question. Is their germination time on the back of the packets or from your friends, or if you got seeds from so-and-so without those instructions, kind of beans, what's their germination time, and go with the general of what a bean is recommended for, or a tomato, if you didn't get that instruction on the back of the packet. No. Yes, there's some questions happening over here. Very end.
Is filtered water better?
I don't know. I mean, does it matter? I don't know. Some plants are sensitive to it. I've never run into a problem with that. I know some people will only use distilled water on certain plants because they don't want to add any more heavy metals or whatnot into the soil. So, short answer, no. All what you want to be picky about and have time for. Yes, Jocelyn again. No worries.
For soils, like when we're getting our soil ready to put into the trays or whatever we're using for planting, I grew up using boiled water. Like in my family, we'd use boiled water to kill anything that might be in there.
Right.
But I've done both, and I didn't know if there was a preferred method.
It depends on what kind. Like if you're buying soil from the garden centers, which you just nodded your head, they're already disinfected. So they've already done their diligence in disinfecting it. So if you boil it again, it's not going to do anything. I think you might bake what's it called? If you're using garden soil, you could do that. You're killing any good bacteria. This is where it is related. You could. I've not experienced, I use the store-bought stuff and haven't had any problem with it. It would be if you're going in a compost and using that, it would be more the chunks and the size and the granular texture that I'd be more kind of picky about, because if you use chunky soil, the seeds aren't going to be able to necessarily push up over that, whereas seeding soil is very fine. And you're about to tell me you boil it just fine.
the soil you buy in stores,
Yeah.
can you water it first before you put it in a tray? Or
Yeah. So if it's dry, like I know a lot of times I get it and it's already got a little bit of moisture to it, which is great. But if it's kind of really dry and dusty, take a container of some sort, a Rubbermaid bin, and just slowly put water into it, hydrate it, mix it, then put a little bit more, because once you've gone to a point of mud, then you've got to add more soil. So if you just slowly put, because a little water will go a long way when you're hydrating that soil, and then you want it to be loose enough that you can still not get it, or that it goes nicely into the trays. And then that way, it will accept the water better. If you put it all fluff, there's a compaction layer, so you might have it nice and even, and then you water it and it all sinks down because the water is just smushed all the air out. So you do want to hydrate it. It's easiest just in a big tub of some sort with some water slowly added.
For the store-bought soil, is there a difference in quality?
I don't think so. Some of it'll say it has fertilizer in it. Some of it will say it has mycorrhizae in it. The fertilized stuff, Seedlings don't need much fertilizer, to be quite honest, when they're at this little stage. The more fertilizer you give, the faster it'll grow. So if you have, the numbers are almost insignificant in what you buy from the store I've seen. So it doesn't really affect it at all, because by the time you've watered a couple of times when it actually needs fertilizer, it'll all be leached out anyway. So that's when you can start playing with your own fertilizer mixes, which...
What about the compost? Would you mix that in?
Not with the seedlings. They really, the compost will be too chunky. You really want something loose and fine. So that way it's just for the small tender roots, they're not strong enough to get through compost, which is usually more chunky and solid in its particle size. You might not notice it. The plant will notice it. Yeah. Good questions. We're all ready. We're all ready to go home and get our hands dirty because it's all that time. Yeah, all right. We're itching for that. Awesome, guys. Thank you so much.